I'm going to talk to you about three experiences, basically. I'm going to talk to you about my experience of taking over and leading SPJIMR. The second is my experience of leading SPJIMR during the pandemic and how an institute can adapt to a pandemic. And third is the experience of building a new institution with a great parent and with a lot of resourcing, but still building a new institution and what some of the challenges of building a new institution are. And some of the opportunities of building a new institution are. And in each of these, I think there are lessons. So, let me start off with giving you a little bit of personal background that when I came to SPJIMR had one leader for 28 years. So, Dr. Mushika had been there from 1986 to 2014. There was a void of 1 year, and I joined the institute. The institute was already a strong institute. Okay, and maybe there has been some stagnation in the last 3 to 4 years with Dr. Shrikant's health also not being. And I had to come in essentially into an environment which was fairly uncertain because, as you understand, if you have a leader for 28 years and no leader for 1 year, then you know that there is ambiguity. Many faculty resumes were on the job market, and all of that. Now, so I'm going to talk about how you go about getting acceptance, building confidence, and bringing change in such an environment. Now, one of the things that happened was around a month before I was to join, I think 45 days, I went to a conference which was headed by Shrikant Datar, who was then on our board. And I met one of the senior faculty at SPJIMR, and she said there is a lot of curiosity about who this new dean is going to be. And in my mind, I equated curiosity to anxiety. And I said, let me go. So 1 month before I joined, I met all the faculty in a faculty meeting. I introduced myself for 5 minutes and I said, do you have any questions? And someone asked me, what is your vision for the institute? I haven't yet joined. I'm 1 month to join. And somebody's asked me this question. So I thought about it. Then on the spot, you have to answer. And my answer was, I will not tell you what my vision is, but I will tell you something else. That I will tell you what I will do in the first 2 months. In the first 2 months, I will meet every faculty member one-on-one. And 45 days after I join, we will go into a room and we will create the vision of the institute, because when we create the vision, it should be our vision and not my vision. So I think this is to my mind the first thing, that visions in academic institutes, the most basic thing in academic leadership is that deans, directors, principals, board members, they do not actually add the value. The value in academic institutions is added at two interfaces: the interface between the faculty and the student, and the interface between the staff and the student. What therefore is the role of leadership? The role of leadership is to enable faculty and staff to create value. And if you are able to understand this simple premise, then everything else follows. That an academic leader, his role is to serve the students, serve the faculty, not tell people what to do, but enable people to do things they want to do, and create an environment and create a culture of curiosity, a culture of openness, a culture of sharing, and perhaps the last and most difficult thing in an academic institute, a culture of collaboration. Now, let me take this further. What I next did was I did these one-on-ones. I also created 3 email IDs, one for students, one for alumni, and one for faculty and staff. These email IDs were good to great at spjimr.org. And essentially in these IDs, I said, tell me what you think is wrong. So then what happens when you say, tell me what you think is wrong? People complain. And within 10 days, you had 100 things that were wrong with the institute. When I say wrong, it was a good institute. There were things to improve, right? Now, what do you do with that? There are many things which are long-term and difficult to fix, but there are small things which are easy to fix. And if you fix those small things, then you build confidence. So the small changes build the confidence that create the environment for the bigger changes. I will give you a very trivial example. 2 issues. One issue was in our campus, when we go into a classroom, we do not know which is the light switch and which is the fan switch, because all these switches are kept next to each other. So we have to switch on everything and switch off everything. Now, this is a problem that has probably been there for 10 years, and all it took was get one person to go there and write L and F with a marker. Something as simple as that. But somebody now feels I complained and I was listened to. Or the software on our laptops has not been upgraded for the last 4 years. Pick it up, upgrade it. Small thing creates credibility. Now you build the context for the larger changes. Now, in SPJIMR, we had what we called a weekly faculty meet. And when I was doing my one-on-ones, and this weekly faculty meet is a great idea. I think SPJIMR may be the only institute in the country where the faculty meet weekly, right? It's a great idea. Now I walked into my first faculty meet, and before the faculty meet, I was told that the faculty meet is the dean's faculty meet. If the dean has a good day, then we have a good faculty meet. If the dean has a bad day, then we have a bad faculty meet. When I say bad, unpleasant, etc. So I walk into my first faculty meet, and the thing I notice is that the dean is sitting here, the deputy dean is sitting here, then there are the senior professors. So the seating in that meet was fixed and by seniority. So half an hour into the meeting, I ask, the way this seating is done, it looks like it's me against the rest of the faculty. And they said, sir, it's always been this way. So then I say, how should this be done? And nobody had asked that question in 28 years, 30 years. And then somebody said, sir, maybe it should be random. We made faculty meet seating random that day. From that day onwards, everybody, including the dean at SPJIMR, when they go into the faculty meet, they have to find their chair. Their name tag is there. Those name tags are rotated 2 or 3 points. It's a very small change, but it is signaling the environment you want. Second thing, you are sitting next to a different faculty member every time. You are beginning to break silos. Okay, so this is the second kind of piece that I'm talking about. The third piece is that when you're talking about collaboration, and I'm not going to give you the full story, but I'm going to give you a set of kind of anecdotes that I think are useful. And I told Dr. Angela that I'll try to talk till maybe 10:40, and then I will open it for any questions, because there will be, I think, questions. 2 or 3 more things here. So one of the things that came out when I did my one-on-ones is everybody said 5-day week. And we were doing 6-day week, or on paper we were doing 5.5-day week. And I don't know what your week is, so I'm not trying to expose for a 5-day week. I'm not saying that. I'm just giving you an example. And my personal take was we had to do 5-day week. Why? Because we wanted to recruit the best faculty from the IIM system, and the IIMs were on a 5-day week. And if your employee value proposition is not competitive, you cannot hire from the best. You cannot hire the best without a compelling employee value proposition. Now, this was the situation where this was something that employees had been asking for 15 years, and nobody, including the faculty, believed it was possible. Because we had many programs, we were teaching all the time. So I called 3 of the senior most opponents of the 5-day week. And I said, I don't want to know why it cannot be done. I want to know how it can be done, and I'm putting you in charge of doing it. 4 months later, we had a 5-day week. When we did the 5-day week, we did not tell anybody till the day before. So on a Friday morning, I walked into a staff meeting, and this is much more bigger for staff because many of our staff are married, they have families, so the impact on their quality of life, and then we announced it overnight. And then in 4 months, therefore, now we have moved to 5-day week. We have improved the employee value proposition. We have created a vision statement. You've got a culture and you've got momentum. Now, there are 2 challenges that were left. One was that this is an institute with a very strong teaching excellence culture. You don't want to dilute the teaching excellence culture, but you want to build in research. And research had not been encouraged for a very long time. So how do you build in research when the faculty have basically been recruited for teaching excellence? How do you do that over a period of time? And how do you do it without weakening the existing strength of the institute, without weakening teaching excellence? So you have to continue to improve on the teaching excellence front, but you have to build in the research. And the way we started it is we did two or three things. Number one, we said we have to get first an excitement and hunger for research. So I conducted a research methodology workshop for 3 days. I got a faculty member from London Business School and a faculty member from London School of Economics to conduct a 3-day workshop. So get people to see the magic of research, create an appetite for research. The second is many of our faculty were not writers. They had not done much writing. They were good teachers, but they are not writers. The second piece there was we had a session on thought leadership for all the faculty, and we created an institute blog. So you don't get started with academic papers. You said we start by writing 1,000 words. And we mentored and edited individual faculty. And today we are at the point where SPJIMR faculty are, probably the most productive in terms of article writing and all of that. Now, in terms of research, you have created some training. We brought in a research head who had a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. So we are now creating the environment. Now you have to go out. One is develop your existing researchers, but hire. We started doing campus placements for PhD students at the top IIMs. We would go to the IIM, we would make a faculty, we would make a PPT, just the way, companies do recruitment. And we started hiring. And today we have over 20 young researchers, PhDs from the various IIMs, so build that. Another layer to this is how do you create two pieces. One is that when you create a vision, it's not enough to create a vision. We socialize the vision in workshops, not only to each and every employee, but I personally conducted alumni meets across the world to socialize our vision and get feedback. Because, as you build an institution, your alumni are your big ambassadors, because alumni are the bridge between the institute and the industry. So this is one set of things. Now let me talk about some other issues. So one is that the faculty meet. As I had told you, initially the faculty meet was already done by the dean. So the first change we made was random seating. The second change we made is we said every alternate faculty meet will be chaired by a faculty member. They will decide the agenda. They have to discuss it with the dean, but they discuss the agenda. And different faculty members are doing every alternate week. So every faculty member gets a chance to showcase their individuality, bring in their role elements. So the larger thing is, the problem in academia, the biggest challenge, in a company, finance depends on marketing. Marketing depends on finance. Marketing depends on operations. So interdependence is in the job. It's in the context. In an academic institute, that is not always true. It is possible for a faculty member to do their teaching, do their research, not talk to anybody and survive. So it is possible to be independent. So the avenues for collaboration, the avenues for larger ownership have to be created from the top. It is the role of leadership to enable and create culture. The rest will follow. Of course, it is the role of leadership to hire faculty, to develop faculty, to create an environment. So this is one piece. Now I'll talk to you about two more things about collaboration. One of the bigger issues in most academic institutes is there is a wall between faculty and staff. There are things that faculty do, there are things that staff do. And when it comes to administration and operations, often you will find that the staff are more knowledgeable than the faculty about many aspects of operation. But when it comes to strategy, we don't give the staff a voice. So starting year 2, we started something called a faculty staff retreat. That after the strategy retreat, we would have a retreat with senior staff members and faculty, saying what are the things we need to do to organize our vision. And from this, we created cross-functional teams. We created one for academics, we created one for infrastructure, where the faculty and staff work together to improve the institute. I believe that this is one of the more critical things that one can do. Two other pieces. At that point in time, we didn't have a faculty lounge. You need a place where faculty can meet without any agenda in a social setting. Of course, in the online world, this all becomes more difficult. But creating that environment where faculty and staff can meet and have discussions beyond work, because often it is through these conversations that new research ideas, co-created teaching, all of these arise. We then created one final innovation that I will talk about here, and maybe I will stop briefly here, Dr. Sunil. Take any questions up to this point, then I will talk about the online phase, then I will talk about BITSoM, because I think even from this
Sure, sir.
should have quite a few questions. Two other pieces that I will talk about. One is this, I talked about the faculty staff. We created something called a teaching panel, because one of the challenges is that the only instrument beyond faculty development workshops we have to encourage good teaching is student feedback. And we all know that student feedback, while important, cannot be the only element of faculty development. So what we created is a teaching panel where we had 7 faculty members teaching to each other and getting 360-degree feedback. Now we are doing 2 or 3 things with this. One is we are breaking the functional silos. Second is we are creating a culture of open feedback within the faculty body. And you are building relationships, because that group of 7, of course, after the teaching session, they would be, in the olden days, chai and samosas. They were bonding over chai and samosas. Now you do this for a year, and then we converted this teaching panel into a co-teaching panel, where we said a faculty member from one discipline and a faculty member from another discipline will teach a class together. Out of those co-teaching panels, new courses got created, some research projects got created. The idea is, how do you curate non-work or even work interactions where faculty members get a better understanding of each other across silos? Maybe I will talk about one final thing before I stop. In 2017, we said, how do we upgrade our curriculum? And we took feedback from industry, CEOs, alumni, students, and faculty. And we did a design thinking workshop where we basically said, what are the qualities we want to see in our students? And we created a list of qualities. And against those qualities, we looked at what our students have. And among the things that came out of that is SPJIMR introduced and still runs a course on management and the liberal arts. Probably the only MBA institute in the country to have this compulsory course. We also strengthened our commitment to design thinking, and design thinking is today taught in every program in the institute. Let me stop here and say that, parallelly there was a lot of external interface, but if I were to look back at this, carrying people along is the single biggest important thing in any change that you want to bring. If people feel they are involved, if people feel they are a part of the change, you want to create the feeling that it is their institute. Whether it is a staff member, whether it is somebody working in your hostel, whether it is a faculty member, it is there. This,
Go ahead, sir. It is some crosstalk.
yeah. So, carrying people along, having a sense of service, creating communication channels. I personally believe, this is my personal belief, that deans and directors must teach. They must teach, because if you teach, you have student connect. If you have student connect, okay, so I will maybe close with one final thing. How do you keep a pulse? Once the institute is doing well, how do you keep your pulse? I started something called Hari Chai Pe Charcha, where I would speak to faculty in groups of 5 and students in groups of 5, and I would ask them only 3 questions. I would say, what do you like about working here? Do you get a chance to use all of your talents at work? And what can we do to improve the answers on 1 and 2? And I would call 5 people into a room, listen for 1 hour. If I listened for 1 hour, I would have 5 pages of notes. It would give me 5 things to do. Even if I did 1 or 2 of those things, the institute would get better all the time. How do you create mechanisms for continuous communication? How do you create openness? How do you carry people along? And perhaps the last thing I will say is this: if there is something you want to create in an institute, a set of values, the leader must demonstrate those values every day. And this is perhaps the most difficult thing, because you have to be very conscious that people do not follow what you say, they follow what you do. So let me stop here for some questions, and then I will go further on the online teaching part, and then I will talk a little bit about my BITSoM experience. But let me stop here. And
First question actually comes from one of our faculty members, Professor Mani P. Sam. The question here is, you were a pioneer in starting simulations. What has the impact been? What was the impact you've seen?
okay, so this is a great question, but I was not a pioneer in starting simulations. I took it further. So SPJIMR, thanks to my predecessor, Dr. Shrikant, who came back from Harvard, he had seen simulations and he introduced it early. So SPJIMR had been teaching with simulations for over 20 years. And they had been teaching with Markstrat, and they had been teaching with Blue Ocean Strategy. And then when we met Harvard for the first time, when I met the Harvard Business Publications team for the first time, myself and two other faculty were there. And we were strong in simulations, we were strong in case studies. And we said that, are you doing a case study training for other faculty, and can we become the nodal institute for Harvard for doing case study training for faculty across the country? And they said, we are sorry, we have an exclusive partnership with IIM Ahmedabad. At that point in time, I said, look, I think the small simulation, as opposed to, when I say small simulation, a Markstrat or a Blue Ocean Strategy simulation is something that is played in 12 to 18 hours. It can go through a full course. There are many small simulations which can be played in 3 to 4 hours. And I personally believe that this had a great future, because this allows you to insert it into a course rather than making your simulation the core of your course. So I suggested to Harvard that, look, we have a lot of faculty who are very good at teaching with simulations. Just like case studies, why don't you do a teaching with simulations module and you let us lead it? They said, look, we've never done it anywhere in the world, so we have to check. They went back to Harvard, discussed with us, came to our classes, and 3 months later, we developed a teaching with simulations course. And this course has become a big hit. It has become a model for Harvard globally. I was one of the 3 faculty who taught it initially. I was there for around 2 years. I led it, and then I exited, and my faculty are leading it. But today we have trained over 300 faculty in simulations from across the country. At least 4 faculty who have joined us as faculty members first came to know SPJIMR because they attended our teaching with simulations workshop. The number of simulations, a lot of interactivity and a lot of familiarity, and particularly for some of the senior faculty, it also improves technology familiarity with faculty. So it has a big impact that wherever you introduce simulations, you find engagement levels of students go up. It needs skill so that the competitive element of the simulation does not overtake the learning element of the simulation. But having said that, strongly encourage faculty to look at teaching with simulations and simulations as an element. Earlier, it was more quantitative. Now you have a much larger variety of simulations. Okay. We have many questions.
We have many. Question comes from Professor Abhilash Nambudri. The question here is, in the business context, we speak about start, growth, decline, and exit. For growth firms, take the external route of creating new product or services. How is this applicable for institutions of higher education?
So, one of the first questions is an academic institute a business? And is business the right analogy for an academic institute? So I don't know, because on the day I came into the institute, I asked the question, what is the objective function of an academic institute? Is the objective function of an academic institute revenue? Is it profit? So to me, there are only 2 answers to this question. It has to be either reputation or social contribution. Now, growth should be a consequence of your mission and purpose, and growth is not an end in itself. An academic institute has to be a sustainable institution. Growth will come. How will growth come? Growth will come from understanding the evolving needs of stakeholders and not necessarily from revenue based targets. As a simple example, today, if you run a business school, earlier we were educating people who might join one company and be there for 25 years. Today, that person will have 4 to 5 distinct careers in a lifetime. So, lifelong learning, online models, all of these are on the table. Unaddressed segments, these are on the table. Growth should be a consequence of your mission and not an end in itself. And fundamentally, I do not believe an academic institute should be looked at as a business. It is, you could call it a social business, but the objective function is contribution and reputation. We are here to make a difference to the world. We need to be sustainable. We need to make money to more than cover our expenses, reinvest in infrastructure, but we are not a profit maximizing entity. So that's.
Dr. Joji Alex. Dr. Joji Alex from marketing area has a question for you. How do you reposition a regional institution to a national institute?
This is a very good question, and there are many superficial answers to the question, including branding and including, but I think the most important piece is you have to first strengthen the internal resolve of basically you have to build the product before you do the positioning. So you can go out and promote. So, very simple thing, start taking national criteria for admission, build hostel capability, take faculty from across the country, but build capability and self-belief before you do positioning. There are many aspects of positioning. I think the way you admit students is clearly one of the aspects. The infrastructure that you create to give people from across the country the confidence. But I think the larger aspect is what is the diversity and orientation of your faculty base. I think you have to get that right. Once you get the diversity, orientation, infrastructure, capability, and intent right, then you start changing your admission processes, then positioning follows. So to me, always product precedes positioning and not the other way around, if that makes sense. Essentially, you cannot sell something to others until you can sell it to yourself. So the first step is to sell it to yourself. Convince yourself that we want to be a national institute. Get all your faculty on board. Get the mindset change done. Get the development done. When you feel that there is confidence and a will, then turn your attention externally. It takes time. My guess is anything less than 5 to 10 years is unrealistic. Rankings and accreditations help at a point in time. But I think it starts with getting the vision, getting the faculty alignment, then getting your recruitment in place, building the processes, etc.
It's next question comes from Professor Jayashree Indran. She is a HR professor here. While introducing such small to big interruptions in the day-to-day strategic affairs of the business, had you ever faced the founder's syndrome?
You will have to elaborate on what you mean by the founder's syndrome, but essentially if you're saying this is not the way we do things around here, or this is not the way your predecessor used to do it, and why are we changing things for the sake of changing things, right? If those are the things you're talking about, I face it every day. I'm sure whoever comes in my place will continue to face it. Maybe they will not only face it with the founder or with Dr. Shrikant, who was there for 28 years, but now they will also say Ranjan would not do it this way, right? So whether you call it the founder syndrome or whether you call it pure and simple resistance to habit and power structure change, the key thing, I believe, is to carry people with you. So there was an organizational structure change which I made, where I brought in 3 associate deans in a situation where everybody had reported to the dean. It took me 1.5 years to make that change. And why did I take 1.5 years? Because I wanted to prepare the organization to the point where that change can be accepted. If you push down change, there is always a danger that it will get reversed the day you are out of the institute. And that's not what you want. You want to build the institute to survive you. You really, from day one, you're very clear that you're not building it for your tenure, you're building it for the period beyond your tenure. So that larger sense of service, the institution is much bigger than you, much bigger than anybody in the institute. You have to strengthen the institute. You strengthen the institute by strengthening its processes, by getting the right people in place, and by creating that most intangible of things, a great culture.
So here's a question from Dr. Minimol. She is the Associate Dean for Research. How could you generate research interest among existing faculty members while focusing on the culture of teaching excellence?
$1 million question, right? It's a very, very tough one. So I think typically what you will find is your faculty, within your faculty, there are already people who are research oriented. But I think the first thing is get the best researchers in the world to train your faculty. A lot of resistance is on account of ignorance. Okay. The second is get in the right people to build the culture. So you will start with 5 to 10 people who are oriented to research. You will educate other people, and slowly you will bring in more researchers. So you will change the balance. So hiring, training and development, creating an environment, and being patient. Not all your excellent teachers will move to research, but many will move to teaching plus research. The second is look at the ecosystem. Start looking at incentives, start looking at compensation, start looking at teaching loads. And this is still work in progress at SPJIMR. It's not fully done. So I think, again, 5 to 10 years. The blog was a big part, Professor, because many faculty had not written at all. So for some faculty, we took the journey saying, let them write a blog. Then let them write something more. Let them get comfortable with writing. Then let them get into partners. So you have to break up your faculty into different silos. Don't say everybody is going to publish in ABDC A or ABDC A star. That doesn't work. So your goals, stretch goals, should be as per faculty capability and interest. And you have to pull up your faculty base over a period of time. Parallelly work on incentives, parallelly work on ecosystem. Ambika was the first batch of our PhD program. I introduced the PhD program after 2 years. He knows what struggles the institute has been through. But through that, we have now got a strong PhD program. And so my answer is this: from teaching excellence to teaching excellence plus research, one thing, never dilute the teaching focus. Continue to innovate on teaching and continue to message on that. Then in parallel, faculty inputs, development, reduction of teaching load, which means bringing in more faculty, bringing in visiting faculty, managing that in parallel, finding 5 to 10 researchers, recruiting 10 researchers, bringing in a research head with the right qualifications. And it's a gradual process. But I think the most important thing is you have to get people excited about research. And for that, you have to get the best inputs to them. I think getting that inputs creates the hunger. Once it creates the hunger, you create 10 to 20 people. Once 2 or 3 internal people start getting results, then slowly you are building an effect. So, Doctor, I don't think the job is done. In SPJMR, my sense is out of 60 faculty, we have 20 to 25 researchers. But teaching excellence continues, and even the research faculty are very clear that they have to be good teachers. We also made a policy. We will not hire a strong researcher who is not a good teacher. I don't care how many ABDC A's and A stars you have. If you don't care about the classroom, you don't care about the students, you're not getting entry into that institute. And this is something I will maintain in my new institute also. Because I still believe, and I may be extreme on this, the fundamental product, the first product is the student. Intellectual output is the second product. And if you are a teacher and you don't care about students, I'm sorry, that is not acceptable. That's not the kind of teachers we want in the system.
More questions. Can we continue? Can we continue with the questions?
I can continue with the questions. Maybe you want to leave me 5 minutes at the end. Okay. So we'll stop questions at 10:55. Okay. I think people will go easily till 10:55, and you will find there'll be appetite for more. And then I'll talk a little bit about the online transition and how culture helps.
Okay, sir. So we are taking the next question from Professor Ajay Lunawat. He works in the finance area. He's a chartered accountant. As a faculty member, the level of sharing keeps reducing as we move from student to the top management. How can we, as a faculty member, overcome our individual fears and insecurity while we share our ideas and suggestions among peers and especially to the senior management?
So, Professor Ajay, I think there are two aspects to this. The first is a significant part of this is the responsibility of senior management. It is senior management's role to create an environment where questions can be asked, to create the forums where we can create the questions, number one. Number two, if you're in academia, as long as you're asking a question professionally, you should have no fear. And my point on this is, my friend and co-author R. Gopalakrishnan has this saying. I don't know if it's original, but he's saying you should have the ability to disagree without being disagreeable. So I should have the ability to say, I disagree with you and focus on the issue and not say you are wrong. So if we are academics in an intellectual environment, we should have the ability to disagree professionally. And honestly, I will go one step further. If you are in academia in India, you're not in it for the money, right? It simply is not the most lucrative option available to you. You're in it for the passion. If you're in it for the passion, you should have no fear. What is the worst thing that can happen to you at any point? But I think the answer is largely this. Some of the fear is imagined, some of the fear is exaggerated. There is a role of senior management to create the environment which reduces the fear. There is a role of professionals to disagree professionally on substantive issues. And there, I would say this. If it is one person being professional, this is an issue. If there is a collective of faculty being professional, I don't see how this can be an issue. So if we create a culture of professionalism, and honestly, we need a culture of what I would call constructive dissent. Whether it be on policies, whether it be on topics, whether it be on pedagogy, we need that culture of constructive dissent. I would go one step further. I always encourage faculty to consider themselves as part of the management. Because when you're looking at an academic institute, the brand of the institute is built by the faculty in the classroom. So I don't think the faculty should be separate from management. And at least for critical decisions, the faculty body should be taken into confidence. This is my point of view. It may not be everybody's point of view.
This question comes from our colleague in the Rajagiri College of Social Sciences campus. I am unable to identify the person, but the question is, in the professional front, do you have an SOP to face unprecedented challenges?
So I have to read the question saying, are you asking it for myself or are you asking it for the institution? If you are asking, so maybe we can't clarify with the individual. So, there was no SOP for COVID. I don't think when COVID first happened, there was any institute which had an SOP. Today we have SOPs. At that point, we didn't. But I do believe that there are 2 or 3 things that I can take back, and maybe this is some of it I would have said. One of the things is that culture helps. Okay, culture helps. Because when the challenge, the basic SOP now is scenario planning. After this, you can do scenario planning for various disruptions and you will have SOPs. But I think when COVID happened, nobody had an SOP. But what did we do? We sent our students home within 3 days. The institute was empty. We had not closed the institute. 2 of our faculty members, without our saying anything, picked up the initiative and said we should start teaching online, called a meeting, did a training program, and we were teaching online within a week. After we started teaching online, the faculty members then, those of us who started, I was one of the first to volunteer, we voluntarily shared our videos with the rest of the faculty. And we kept doing a lot of sharing to speed up the learning curve. After that, we started, as we learned, we created SOPs. I'll give you a simple example of one thing. One of the things we learned is that you simply cannot have the same number of hours of teaching online as you have offline. So if you're doing 5 sessions a day, the number of sessions has to reduce. The amount of content has to reduce. There is fatigue for students. As we went further, so I don't think we created SOPs, but over a period of time, today, I think if you look at SPJIMR, they will have very, very strong SOPs for online teaching. They will have SOPs for crisis management. But those SOPs got created along the way. The second is that as you do this, you will realize that the people you need to involve in a crisis are different. So we had a management committee, but over and above the management committee, we started an operations review meeting. And in the operations review meeting, now the person who handled the hostel is there because they understand student affairs. The head of IT is there. So the range of people you now need to consult on a weekly basis has changed because the nature of the problem has changed, because technology and curriculum development have got fused. And this process of making faculty comfortable and knowledge sharing has to continue. I'll give you a simple example. I teach design thinking. In design thinking, we use post-it pads. Very often in group work, you will have people scribbling ideas on post-its and putting it onto one common white board or chart and then sharing that chart. And everybody said that cannot be done. And before my first class, I started Googling. And I discovered that there was a school in Italy that had moved online in 2 days, and they used a tool called Padlet, which allows you, it will give you a WhatsApp link. And from that WhatsApp link, anyone can put post-it pads. And actually, in some ways, it is better than the physical because video and images and text can be used in the Padlet. So I think a large part of this is if you have a culture of experimentation and quick learning, crisis, the SOPs get created, but that ability to review quickly and change and adapt, agility becomes more important, I think. Yes, Jayashree, Padlets, Poplets, there are many tools now, but I think the critical point is, in the first month, if somebody figures out a tool, please share it with the faculty body. How do you speed up the learning curve for the institute as a whole? That is an element to think about and focus on.
So the next question comes from Harish B. Professor Harish is a faculty in the marketing area. And his question is, can you tell us more about the way, as a leader, you thought about developing culture at SPJIMR? Was it articulated in black and white or implied?
You demonstrate it before you articulate it. But I think at 45 days, we created a vision, right? So some aspects of the culture were demonstrated and we did not articulate. We already had a mission statement. I remember going on my first faculty meet, putting up the mission statement, which was to influence practice and promote value-based growth, and said this mission statement is a holy cow, everything else is open to change. So one of the ways you articulate culture is by keeping on going back to your mission statement, saying, is this influencing practice? When we are doing research, is it practice oriented? What does value-based growth mean? Are we behaving? So if you have a North Star, like a mission statement, and you keep going back to it, then that is the way of articulation. In 2019, because the faculty had got bigger, I started with an exercise to articulate the institute's values. As we speak, my successor will then put the institute values in place, and they will then take the institute values to the students, to the alumni, and all of that. There's a socialization. But in the initial days, you don't articulate culture, you demonstrate culture. You talk about it. You talk about it a lot in the faculty meets. We did a rebranding in 2017. And as part of that rebranding, we came up with this slogan called Courage and Heart. And I wrote up that we want to create students with courage and heart. And courage is the courage of your convictions, the courage to speak, and heart is caring for others. So this then became some kind of a statement that we would utter, we would practice. But my sense is that on values and culture, if you do too much slogan mongering before you do action, people don't believe it. You have to get people on board first. You have to get a movement where a number of people are demonstrating it. Then articulation is needed at a second level of scale. So, and when you do culture, you have to figure out the strengths of the existing culture. You can't impose a culture. You understand the strengths and you improve it incrementally, and that's kind of the way you build it and move it along.
All right, sir. So the time is 10:54 now. Do we take one more question or do we?
One more question and then I'll try to close with a few things.
All right. So I'm taking a question from Vishnu NS. Do you think traditional face-to-face classroom teaching or learning approaches produce superior learning results than technologically based distant learning?
Okay. I'm an old school teacher. We all have answers we want to hear, right? So let me tell you, I think the answer is very simple. The answer is and, not or. The answer is how can we combine distant learning with classroom learning to create superior outcomes for society as a whole. And let me put my views on this at three levels. The first level is if I put the outstanding teacher in a classroom at 9 on 10, the outstanding teacher in an online classroom, even if he is very good, will not be more than 8. Okay, so that's the first point. Now, the second point, however, is that not everybody can afford or access the outstanding teacher in a classroom because that is an elite education. Distant learning allows you to give the outstanding teacher at 8 on 10 to 200 times the students at 1/10 of the cost. And that is the real long-term promise of distance learning. So that is number one. Okay. Number two, I believe that there are some things we can do that we should not directly translate the physical classroom to an online classroom. The combination of synchronous and asynchronous is very important. There are some things where I just want to transfer knowledge. I should record a asynchronous session and give it to people. Students can then see it on their own time. It is where I need discussion. It is where I need two-way learning that I will need more direct interaction. Number two. Number three, one of the bigger weaknesses of the online format is what I would call the chai pe charcha. Very often you will have a session and then you will sit around with a group of students in your room and talk, and these conversations don't happen. So in online, it is very important that we voluntarily as faculty offer students conversations in groups of 5, because the questions that get asked in smaller groups are much beyond. It is our responsibility as teachers to teach much more than the subject. And the questions that get asked in smaller groups integrate the subject and the students' aspirations and life, and we need to make that. The final thing I have discovered is that if for a student, physical classroom with offline peer learning is 9 on 10, online classroom with online peer learning is 7 on 10, online classroom with offline peer learning is 8 on 10. So you will find that if students are back in the hostel and taking classes online, but they can do group work physically, they are much, much happier. So it's a long answer, but I think when you go back, when we do go back to offline, don't stop online. There are things in online. I'll give you a simple example. You want a visiting faculty or a guest lecturer come in for half an hour. You have to plan for that in the physical world 2 months. You have to get him in, have the paraphernalia of a reception. He has to drive down, coordinate calendars, meetings get postponed. Online, I found at 2 days notice, I go get senior CEOs to come into my classroom for 15 minutes. So if you use visiting faculty or you use CEOs, you can use CEOs from across the world. One of the nice things that online can do for you is it can make geography history. The second thing it can do for you is it can take your best teachers and make their quality available to a larger number of students at a significantly lower price. So, we are running out of time. So let me just close with one or two things, and maybe I'll close with personal anecdote first, and then I will, talk about something else. So, and these are both messages to teachers. So the personal anecdote is when I was early on in my career in corporate training, I was doing a workshop. And in each of these workshops, when you ask students to introduce themselves, there are what we call badmash bache. People who are always passing comments, nudging other students and laughing and all of that. And there was one such student. And normally, you might have a tendency as a teacher to just cut the student and put the student in his or her place after maybe half an hour. But then there was a round of introductions. And I had just become a parent. And my 6-month-old's name was Aditya. And when this student introduced himself, this badmash bacha, so to speak, his name was also Aditya. And after that, whenever he asked a question, I saw the face of a 6-month-old. And believe me, at the end of one day, he was my best student. What is my point? The assumptions we make about students are self-fulfilling prophecies. If you think students are lazy, if you think they are disinterested, they will be lazy and disinterested. If you think students are there because are willing to learn and are enthusiastic about your class, and if you can hold that assumption long enough is critical, you can create engagement in any class. So that is one. The second is a message, this I read from Simon Sinek, and this is about leadership. That Simon Sinek was once a speaker in a very public forum. And the first year he was a minister. So when he went to speak, there was a limousine to receive him. He was brought into the conference. He was in a green room. He asked for coffee. They gave him coffee in a fancy china cup. He went sipping his coffee from the china cup and he spoke. Next year, he was no longer a minister, but speaking on the same topic at the same subject, same venue. He took an Uber to the venue. He said, I want coffee. They said, sir, coffee machine udhar hai. The coffee machine is there. So then he went and took his coffee in a plastic cup. Now he went and stood at that forum and he spoke. And then he said, look, I was the same person. My expertise was the same. My position had changed and I had moved from my china cup to a plastic cup. And he says, as leaders, it is useful to realize that your true worth is the plastic coffee cup. The rest is the position. So, very, very important question for a leader. If you did not have your position, would people still follow you? I measure myself today by the number of faculty from SPJIMR who still come to me for guidance. I measure myself by the goodwill I have in institutions that I have left. Because true leadership does not come from position. It comes from enabling and serving other people. I will close there. Thank you very much.